24 at 6 p.m. Commissioners Bateson, David, Harwood, James, Malloy, Slater are present. Commissioner Zhao is absent. Are there any changes to the agenda? No changes are requested. At this point, I'd like to poll commissioners to see if anyone believes that ORA 24-0001, amending the Land Use and Development Code, Section 8.2.203, lot size, density, and site area to change the minimum lot size for subdivisions proposed within the Coeur d'Alene Tribe Reservation. Does anyone feel they have a conflict?
Madam Chair, if I could, I'll speak up and just say that, as I've said before, I reside within the reservation boundaries, but I've been advised by council that there's no conflict because my position has been contrary to my economic interests on this matter. But I wanted to fully disclose that.
Thank you. This public hearing will address case ORA 24-0001. The Planning Commission has conducted a workshop on this issue, and there is a completed comprehensive plan accordance analysis. The public hearing process we'll be using is that Community Development Director David Callahan will provide an overview of the proposed changes and answer questions that the planning commissioners may have. Next, the hearing will be open for public comment, and once all comments have been heard, the commissioners will move to deliberations. So at this point, I will open the public hearing, and Director Callahan, if you would take it from there.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, everyone. I will be brief since we've done a workshop on this, but since there may be members of the public watching this on YouTube, I will at least cover the basics. And the basics start with this proposed amendment originates from our own Board of County Commissioners when they heard the tribe request for a rezoning of the reservation to go from rural to agricultural. The board's decision was to allow any person that owns property in that area that wants to opt out to do so, and to do so up until June. And so we've been taking names, and just so you know, at the moment we have over 17,000 acres of people that have chosen to opt out. That's virtually all of the land that's not owned by the tribe. So that's the stage upon which the Board of County Commissioners decided that the one thing they would like to consider in the future is the water rights part of this issue, which is the tribe's concern that the more density and more development there is in the reservation, the more possibility for conflicts over water there may be. So this was actually County Commissioner Matari's idea, and the other commissioners agreed, to go from minimum 5-acre lots to 10-acre lots in the rural zone. And that's really the only part of this that's in front of you. There is a somewhat unusual, I'll point it out on the screen here, unusual aspect of this code amendment where it goes on to say that, I guess I don't actually have it here. Oh, there it is, item B. The minimum size on shall be 10 acres, and then it goes on to say that there'll be an automatic expiration date that the commissioners will set. Normally, that doesn't enter into the code, but Commissioner Matari expressly asked for that. I'm reading between the lines because he didn't tell me, but I think it was because he just wants to put people on notice that this is truly an interim solution to see how things go over the next 2 to 3 years. And then presumably the then board will reconsider. So a little unusual in that way, but the other way to look at it is any sitting board can decide at any time to ask for a code amendment. The only other thing I can think to point out, you have my analysis of how this compares to the comprehensive plan. I assume you've read through that, and I'm scrolling through it on the screen. I'm not going to read through it, because what I found in going through it is there are either no conflict or the comp plan is, this amendment is supported by the current comp plan. That, of course, is just my view. You can choose to decide otherwise. If you do, I would please ask you to put that on the record as part of your vote. That's always useful, or to the extent you feel comfortable. I think that covers everything I meant to say, unless you have questions for me.
Thank you for that. When was the original request made by the tribe to the county commissioners?
2.5 years ago. It took some time to get it processed and get it in front of the county commissioners.
And then this has been floating around for a while. Has there been any communication from the tribe if they are for or against this, or where they stand?
I've spoken with the tribe's legal counsel, but only orally.
Yeah.
And orally, he told me he thought the tribe supports it, in his view. I have nothing in writing.
Is there a normal response time between the decision that the county commissioners make and then this goes forward, that they have to respond, or is it just open-ended and they can decide at some point later, nope, we've changed our mind and we're not going to support this?
They could actually hold their opinion right up to the hearing date in front of the Board of County Commissioners.
Okay.
And show up at that hearing and give us their viewpoint.
In this
But they
case-
need to make it known at the hearing,
Okay, so they do have to get on record at
like
some
everyone
point.
else. Thank you.
Okay. And then they could either be for it and against it, and if they're against it, does that mean it comes back to us and we start this process all over again?
No, the commissioners could choose to approve it anyway.
Okay,
That's why it's a public hearing here and in front of the county commissioners.
okay.
Pat Braden, Civil Deputy Prosecutor, for the record. I just add to that, basically they have a voice but not a veto.
The tribe,
Yes.
okay.
And I said that when the tribal rezoning proposal was before this commission also.
So, Madam Chair, this gets confusing to me because of the overlap, I guess I would call it, with the, what do we call it, the tribal rezone that's already been done? I mean, so they are very similar, I guess related, maybe even the same effort. So a lot of the testimony we heard for that, or at that public hearing, I guess kind of applies to this one. And one thing that you mentioned, Mr. Callahan mentioned at the public hearing for the other one was, do you think that if this were to pass, the tribe would cease objecting to divisions, right?
Right.
And you said that they would not answer that question.
And it's fair to say they still haven't and may never answer that question.
Right.
That's what the courts are for.
So you ask if they need to make up their minds by the time the county commissioners have their public hearing. That's true in a sense, but they can always raise their hand and say, well, we're not happy with the way things are. We want to go for a 20-acre minimum, as I understand it.
They can ask.
Yeah,
Right,
theoretically
which is what they
could.
did in July of 2021 or whenever that was.
But again, that would go through a whole series of public hearings
Right,
again.
and
with
we'd
the-
be here again doing the same thing.
Right.
You mentioned some of the paperwork that one of the reasons behind this is to avoid litigation by the tribe?
Yeah, potentially.
Potentially.
So how does this then create that opportunity to mitigate that risk?
Well, presumably the tribe would be reasonably happy with this solution and might refrain from suing us.
Basically by limiting development within their, on non-tribal lands within their reservation, as opposed to, as a kind of a compromise measure, as opposed to prohibiting it, which is what the rezoning designation would have done.
Another thing that confuses me is which of my comments should be here and which should be in deliberations. we just let fly and see what happens, or?
Well, my view, and Pat, this is more of a legal question than a planning one, but my view is any rationale you want to be known as part of your decision, you should say in deliberations.
Madam Chair, if I could, the key word that was used by council there is compromise. The tribe asked for a rezone and it was rejected. And the commissioners, I believe in their wisdom, have come back and said, but we should offer a compromise to address their concerns and to reduce the density so it doesn't affect the Montana factors as we refer to them. And I think it's meritorious that the commissioners have chosen a compromise. The alternative is a hardline position that alienates the tribe and pushes them towards the only solution they have is litigation at that point. And I've been an advocate all along for avoiding litigation and discouraging litigation. And I think this will help to alleviate some of the overinflation of the tire, if you will, to reduce the risk of it bursting and to hopefully reach a compromise that's agreeable to the tribe and to the commissioners. Can we force the tribe to accept it? No. Nobody can force another side to accept something in a compromise situation. We can hope they do. And so that for those reasons, I think it's beneficial to all parties here to reach compromise. Hardline positions result in litigation and in harm to one side or another. A compromise is intended to avoid one-sided win and one-sided loss, and I advocate for that here.
Madam Chair, I just thought of one last thing I should add in that might be useful in your decision-making. Technically, this is a downzoning, meaning it's a reduction of property rights. However, it is the least amount of downzoning I have seen in 43 years. The reason I'm so bold as to say that is normally a downzoning is going from one zoning category or district to a lesser intensive one, say from rural to agricultural. That would be a pure downzoning. Here, the only thing that's changing is the lot size. The rural zone stays in place. So all of the uses, everything else that the rural zone allows remains the same. And because I know there was some confusion about parcels and lots, just stay mindful that every word that is in the code is carefully chosen. Pat carefully chose lots in this case because this is the only zoning district we have left that still says lots in it. All the other ones say parcel or parcel and lots, and that's purposeful because lots has a defined meaning of something that's been through a subdivision. Parcel is any parcel of land that's described by deed. I hope that helps.
Well, I think there could also be an argument that it is a downsizing, but many people might be willing to pay more to have more acreage. So it's not, apples to apples, but there could be an increased value in the land because they're actually getting more acreage instead of less.
And that is pointed out. And that is pointed out in Mr. Callahan's analysis, right at the beginning of the first part of the table where it says Objective 1, Policy 5. Yeah, next page.
That almost sounds like an economic benefit.
Oh, sorry.
Is it
It is that page.
There you go.
My pagination's a little different. But yeah. So, yeah, you've got that view, and of course you have Commissioner, Malloy's view that, that it is, a downzoning, and, in a sense at least, you're taking a right somebody had and cutting it in half, basically. Now, we'll put words in your mouth, Mr. Malloy.
No, but you did well.
Oh, thank you.
And I'll probably use them again.
But this is not retroactive. This is going forward.
Yes,
So this is anybody who decides to purchase land in the outskirts, the tribal land. This is where this would be taking effect, correct? We're not, because on this paper, the ordinance number, it actually says 2023. So take on effect, that would have to be changed to 2024.
Yes.
yeah, which I did, it just apparently hadn't made it to your copies.
But I want to see if I understand what you're saying, because what I understood you say is a misunderstanding. This is retroactive. If someone out there owns 20 acres, with the passage of this, their right to divide, I guess you'd say, into 5 acres, it will be changed to a right to divide only into 10. Am I right on that?
If they didn't opt out.
That is true, but
No.
anybody who's submitted an application, say for a 4-lot subdivision that's was submitted prior to the date that would go into effect would be vested.
Right,
So,
but
yeah.
if someone has owned the land since 1976, or it doesn't matter what date, some long period of time.
Yeah, or
they're
yesterday.
subject to
You're
this. If they weren't subject to it, there would be no downzoning.
That's true.
I think there might be a usefulness in distinguishing terms. It's not retroactive in the land use planning sense of the word, in that it's not going backwards and taking things away from people where they already have it. For instance, if they have a 4-lot minor subdivision today, it's not undoing that.
Right.
And as Pat just said, ones that we have in the mill, which we do, they get to go forward under the 5-acre rule.
Right, no, I think I understand that,
Yeah.
but it pertains to everybody who owns property
Yes.
already.
You are correct.
Yes.
Not
It
only
does
to
do-
those who might purchase in the future.
Yes.
Correct.
I actually just one, that when somebody buys land on the reservation, are they informed of the tribal rights over water? That is part of the deal, that they are fully aware of, that the tribe, because that was educated, in 2005, that they got water rights?
I'm not.
It's ongoing. I think there have been decisions by the water court that have given them, have recognized their rights, which basically trump everybody else's.
Right.
My understanding is that on title reports, one of the exceptions is any right the tribe may have in any given property within the reservation. And if they, if somebody applies for a water right, of course, or checks the water rights through the Idaho Department of Water Resources, then that would come up. So it is, those rights are of public record.
And it is disclosed at the time of closing, the way Pat described, but unless you do your homework, you wouldn't necessarily
Know that.
know.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I could put a fine point on that in a practical setting. In the northern part of the reservation, just as you cross into the reservation at Fighting Creek, beyond Fighting Creek, the next creek is Lake Creek. Lake Creek is a very important creek to the tribe. They have reestablished cutthroat trout in that creek that were decimated when the northern pike were introduced into the lake, and there were other problems. And their tribe is monitoring the flow of Lake Creek. If the flow of Lake Creek falls below a certain amount, it is my belief the tribe will take action, and they will use their water rights to trump everybody else's rights, maybe even to the point of shutting wells down in the area. So, I mean, that's the kind of chaos that can result from a development and density that siphons off the water to the point where one source reduces the flow to a point where the tribe has the rights under the Montana analysis to come in and trump everybody else. And it's that kind of chaos that we should be mindful of and try to avoid.
Madam Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
Do we have it? Yeah, we haven't opened it
We
yet. Do we have
haven't opened it
anybody?
yet.
We haven't asked for testimony yet?
No.
No.
Oh, man.
But doesn't look like there's going to be much.
There might be somebody online, I suppose.
No, actually, just Commissioner James.
So I will open the public comment session. Since we have nobody in line to testify, unless,
Oh, sorry, Kurt.
are you going to come up?
Terrible when you hold a party and nobody comes. Thank you.
He says he does not wish to speak,
Oh.
but he is in favor. Being as we have no one in line to speak, I won't
And-
go through all the rules
And no one online, right?
and no one online, so I don't see much point in going through all the rules of comment. Now, Commissioner Malloy, if you would,
Well, I'll accept what about written comments? How long are they,
we don't
Haven't
have
actually
any.
received any
but are they accepted up until when?
right now,
This is it?
yeah. And the same thing for the county commissioners.
I'm embarrassed to repeat myself, but I move that we close the public hearing.
I second.
Commissioner Bateson,
Aye.
Commissioner Harwood, Commissioner James,
No.
Commissioner Malloy,
Yes.
Commissioner Slater,
Yes.
Chair David.
Yes,
Yeah, it was just a closed public testimony.
right. Yeah, did Lee understand that that's what that was for?
No, I get that. I was mentioning Commissioner Harwood and Commissioner James.
So did Lee understand?
I don't know.
Lee, are you hearing us?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was a bit sketchy. That was just to close the public hearing, or to close the comment period?
Yes.
Okay, then I reverse my vote. I'm for it. My apologies.
Okay, we will now enter into deliberations. The purpose of this code amendment is to make the division of land within the Coeur d'Alene Reservation to 10 acres, replacing the 5 acre. I guess we'll
Madam
ask-
Chair, I support a lot what Lee has to say. He lives down there on the res, and I used to be a resident of Benewah County, and when I moved to Benewah County, I made sure I didn't buy any land on the reservation, because I worked with Indian tribes across the United States, but I worked with the Coeur d'Alene tribe for 20 years as head of the Basin Commission, so, and he's absolutely correct about Lake Creek being a very important creek to those folks. I worked with them on getting rid of the pike and reestablishing the fishery in that creek. So it's really important that we don't end up with reduced flows, especially in that creek that's so important to them. So the business of water rights is, I manage a public drinking water system and very, involved with water rights as well. So I think that all the comments that he made, I'm in support of, and I think that we need to be careful in how we deal with this so that we don't overextend the demand for not only water down there, but even from our own aquifer up here as well.
Well, of course, if I may, Madam Chair, I disagree with some of what Commissioner James has to say. And compromise, to me, does not always end in a win-win situation. I mean, when someone demands something of someone else and the someone else doesn't want to give it up, then compromise amounts to a loss, and that's where I am on property rights. So these people bought this land. You're talking about being retroactive or not. When they bought this land, they bought it as a rural zone, and they understood the rights they had, the rights that were recognized, I guess you'd say, by the zoning, that they could divide into or down to 5-acre parcels. And now, exactly, it's a perfect example of compromise. The tribe wanted 20, right, 20-acre minimums.
Well, they actually wanted rezoning that would prohibit
Yeah,
divisions of land.
it would
The
prohibit
the
division.
exemption exists regardless of the zoning.
Yeah, see, there I go with the,
You have to distinguish subdivisions from exemptions.
okay, well, I don't know if I know what I mean or not, but you know what I mean, I think.
I do.
And, so I think Commissioner James said that the tribe approached the county to do what you said, which means that an owner of 20 acres could not then divide. And I think you used the term that failed. And I think if we're going to parse words or look at semantics, I think planning would say it didn't fail. The tribe's land has all been rezoned, right? Isn't that correct? Any tribal lands have been rezoned, just as they asked, just as they requested.
I haven't actually mapped it out to see, but
Well, I mean, that was,
presumably there's some tribal land that's rural that'll go to ag.
okay,
Yeah, that was mapped out in SCJ's materials that they prepared for the,
It was, but now the map's gonna look different now that we have 17,000 acres pulled out of
yeah,
that.
true.
but the 17,000 acres isn't tribal. It's,
Right. So that's my point, if you will. I'd like to see a map that shows just the tribal land that's being rezoned.
okay.
I don't know what that looks like yet.
Well, I guess my point was all of the land that the tribe asked to be rezoned, all of the tribal land that the tribe asked to be rezoned has been rezoned.
Not technically until this summer, when the board will reconsider.
And okay, that brings up my next point. So this summer is like June 30th is what you're
Yes,
getting
sir.
at.
Right.
June 30th is the last
Off
day
day.
that someone who can opt out can opt out.
Yes, sir.
And as you know, I've been looking at owners, and it becomes clear that there are a few owners that own a lot of land, but there are far more owners that own a little bit of land. And as far as I can tell, there are 80-some owners who have not responded, either because they haven't paid attention to the postcard that they should have got, or because they don't want to opt out, one of the two. But there are a lot of owners who could be affected by the opt-out process. And that's another thing that bothers me, is we're in the middle of an opt-out process. And these people think that they're opting out, and a few weeks ago or months ago, they knew they had opted out of this rezone. And before their keyboards are even cold, they turn around and there's a proposal to change the whole thing. So changing the whole thing, meaning we were just kidding about opting out and maintaining your right, I have to use air quotes, to divide or whatever you want to call it to 5-acre lots. And we were just kidding about that because what we really mean is 10. And then the opt-out period hasn't even closed yet. The timing on this is, I think, very poor.
Did affected people receive notice of this proceeding?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I was going to ask that question. You know, these folks that might not know all this was going on, you know, have they been notified, every single one of the parcel owners been notified about, hey, you better, you know, opt out or opt in or whatever, or this is going to happen to you and won't be rural property anymore, so.
I think, no, sorry, Dave, go ahead.
My apologies. Madam Chair, may I introduce something?
Absolutely.
this hearing was noticed in the usual customary way, which is the newspaper of record. We did not send out 2,000 postcards like we did for the rezoning.
Oh,
But at the rezoning, the commissioners made it clear they wanted this to happen. And then we've noticed this, like I say. So to me, the fact that there is no one in the audience and no one that's responded is rather telling.
telling of what?
In my view, that they're informed and they're fine with this.
In my view, it would be that they weren't adequately informed.
Well,
The tribe is not even here.
and I know the tribe knew. So that to me is telling.
Well, of course, yeah, that's a bad example, because of course they would be for what Commissioner James calls compromise, I call incrementalism. You know, they couldn't get 20, so let's try 10, and we'll work on 20 next year or the year after that. So it's just a gradual incrementalization of the takings, I would say, of property rights or the loss of property rights. So, and there's no emergency, in my opinion, or I've heard of no emergency on water. There's some anecdotal evidence that an important well, I guess, at the city of Worley or something, is not producing as much as it used to. So there's some concern about water quality. But how many of us on this commission have read the very thorough analysis done by one of the residents out in that area, a property owner? He analyzed statistics from the Idaho Department of Water Resources, all the well logs, and showed that actually the wells in the affected area are producing better than wells in other areas of Kootenai County. So water, you know, I'm not sure water, there's no emergency. And if there were an emergency, the county could call a moratorium. But a moratorium only lasts for 182 days, I think, if I read right.
Correct.
And because they can't call a moratorium, they have to write a moratorium, in my opinion, and call it a zone change. And that's especially evident when they put that this ordinance shall be null and void and no further force or effect on or after some date, which we talked about a little bit at a workshop. That might be 3 years, 4 years, 2 years, whatever. So ineffectively, that's an extended moratorium. So because they can't do a moratorium, they find another way to do a moratorium, in my opinion.
Madam Chair, if I could, I respectfully have points of disagreement here with my respected and learned commissioner. The tribe did not get what it asked for. I don't think that's a fair characterization. What the tribe wanted was every rural parcel of 20 acres or more within the reservation to be rezoned agricultural, which was largely the parcels to the east of Highway 95. That was not provided to them. They were rebuked, and the commissioners did not give them that. So the tribe did not get what they want. That takes me to the takings concept. Rezoning is not a takings. That's clear under the law. It's been stated to this board many times by our learned counsel that it is not a takings. One does not have a right to have the property zoned one way or another. Compromise versus incrementalism. If one believes that incrementalism is the problem here, then one never compromises. And failure to compromise leads to conflict. Conflict leads to lawsuits. And that's in my bailiwick. And I see the actual human carnage that occurs when parties get locked into lawsuits. There is often no party who really wins. It results in damage to both parties and ancillary damage to other people. Here, the ancillary damage is very specific, I think, because if the tribe files a lawsuit, and I'm repeating what I've said before, but it bears repetition, if the tribe files a lawsuit here against the county, developers and those who want to develop their property within the reservation boundaries are not going to be able to do it. No bank in their right mind is going to give a loan, and no title company is going to insure property that's at risk of who knows what, given the outcome of the litigation between the county and the tribe. But if we want to go down that road and we refuse compromise and want to view it as incrementalism, then that is a road for conflict. And I understand that that's one point of view, and I respect the point of view that, okay, so what? That's the way it is. Let the courts figure it out. We can do that, but it comes with human carnage and ancillary damage to people that can be avoided, I think, potentially here. The last point I want to make, and I've made before, at one time where you are sitting was within the Coeur d'Alene Reservation boundaries. The Coeur d'Alene tribe was here first. Their tribal boundaries were shrunk. They now have a tribal boundary where people like me have bought within the tribal boundary. Some people have avoided it because they don't want to be subject to the property rights the tribe has. Those who bought into the tribal boundaries, they did so knowing, or they should have known, that the law gives the tribe a certain, as we say in the law, bundle of sticks of rights to their property. Hence the Montana decision. The tribe has certain rights to property within the tribal boundaries. I do not own all the rights to my property. As an example, the state can come in and condemn my property. In fact, they did. When they modified Summit Bay Road, they took a slice of my property. I didn't have a choice. The state took it, and they put a road through it. And they paid me what they felt was fair compensation. I could dispute how much that is, but I can't keep them from taking that right, that property away from me, because that's a property right the state has. Because the state is a jurisdictional power greater than myself. And the same is true with the tribe. Whether we like it or not, if you buy within the reservation, you are buying property that's subject to whatever rights the tribe has to that property that they had before you ever got there. And there's been discussion of first in time, first in right. The tribe is here first. They have certain rights, and those rights include whatever the law under the Montana decision and other law gives them to property within the reservation. And the misconception that I or anybody in the reservation has absolute right to do whatever we want with our property no matter what anybody thinks, including the tribe or the state, they are misguided, because that is not the law, and that is not how property rights are followed within the United States of America, within this within this state. Thank you.
Is there a list of those property owners in that area that have been sent that postcard and have responded? Is someone keeping track?
Yeah, I'm not hearing. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Okay, all right,
Thank you.
thank you.
Much better.
Is there a list being kept of those owners who have responded and opted out so that you can see who has not responded? And if there's a handful of them, maybe someone can actually just call them to make sure, so that he can be satisfied that those people who own that property have been sufficiently notified, and they're not, maybe they thought it was a piece of junk mail and tossed it in the mail. So is that list being kept?
Partially. We have a list of everyone that's opted out by parcel number and ownership. We don't have phone numbers. We haven't correlated that against all of the property owners in the area. So I don't actually have what you've suggested, but it's something we could do. It's just a matter of matching up one roll against another, an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, maybe again, that's a
And
compromise to satisfy.
May I interject? Staff has been great. When I've asked for these lists, I've got them. So I've got a list of all of the addresses to which postcards were sent.
right.
And then I got a list of, the list of opt-outs is published on Keeping Kootenai, so it's available for anybody to see. And so then I compared that to the mailing list, and the mailing list includes every owner, though. because the first three that I happen to know some people out there, the first three that I called all owned property that was too small to be affected by this. So then I realized that the list of 1,000 was more actually than what actually applied. So I asked for a list of owners ranked by acreage. And then, of course, when you get down, you start at the owners of mass acreage to owners of 20 acres, and it cuts that list down by far. But there are no phone numbers. I asked for those already. And so we're limited to mail. And I suppose, to be sure, well, the real way to be sure, I'm going to reiterate what I've already iterated, would have been to have them opt in rather than opt out. Then there wouldn't be this concern. But because we're asking them to opt out, to me, it's important that everybody knows what rights they have to opt out, and we don't ever know that unless you visit with them, and it almost has to be done by registered mail or something. And by my workings of the addresses, it looks to me like there are about 80 of them that have not responded for one reason or another. But well, I don't know about what. I forgot what my but was.
Madam Chair, I'm very supportive of property rights, and I know if I was someone who had purchased 20 acres down there, 40 years ago, and I'm about ready to croak or something and going to give it to the kids and they want to, subdivide it, then, there is going to be an effect on the current property owners. There's no question about that. We don't want to fool ourselves into that. I think the key to this whole issue is it worth making this type of an attempt to work with the tribe a little bit better, with the understanding we're also probably hurting people who have had loaned land within the reservation for many, many years. Nobody's going to come out good on this. We shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking that if you can only divide at 20 acres into two 10-acre properties, it's going to be worth the same as dividing into 2.5. That's not going to take place. I don't think that does. To me, I know how much the 5-acre lots in my subdivision are selling for now. They sold for $40,000 in the 90s. They're selling for $350,000 now for a 5-acre property. And then the 10-acre ones are selling for maybe $450, but that's not double $350. You see what I'm saying? So it is going to affect the current property owners, and we need to understand it. But I don't know how else to approach it, and there's no way to fully understand or anticipate how this might sit with the tribal council too. And the tribal councils change. Boy, you mean they can have a new election and you get a whole new tribal council and they can look at this issue completely differently than what the current tribal council looks at it at. So their governments are very fluid. They can be very fluid depending upon who gets elected to their tribal councils at any one time and who becomes their chairman of their tribal council.
Well, and fluidity affects the county commissioners as well, and our commission for that matter. So that's all. Change is always there.
Madam Chair, if I could, both gentlemen commissioners are actually very correct. Although dealing with tribes, I can tell you that, and I've dealt with, counties also, and commissioners. There is by and large, generally, not casting any aspersions or anything on any tribe or the Coeur d'Alene tribe, but there seems to be a greater difference of opinion at times with tribal councils, which, to my mind, to the extent it's relevant here, is what we are doing with this change is to try to create an environment where a tribal council does not get elected that feels they have to fight for the rights that were never recognized at all when the tribe asked for the accommodation of the rezoning. And the more we take a hardline approach, the more we create the environment where there will be a tribal council, if not this one that comes along, who then goes the litigation route. And I want to add, though, while I do agree generally that we need to be honest that, and I'm all for honesty here, that by limiting this to the subdivision to 10 acres being divided, that's more than 5 acres, absolutely. But again, I impress upon us that if the tribe commences litigation like they did with the water rights, you could be looking at 10, 15, 20 years of federal court litigation and appeals that will tie up the rights of everybody within the tribal boundaries, which will encumber everybody's property rights, which will devalue everybody's property rights within the tribal boundary, and create chaos again where people can't get loans to purchase land, to build houses, to subdivide, to build a mere shed they want to build and get a loan from their local bank. They're not going to be able to do it if we're in this type of environment. And to me, that's a palpable reality if we don't foster compromise in some respect. And I think this is a fair compromise. And it does have a provision, kind of a provision for the commissioners to put a limit on it with that kind of quirky, line in there. But, so the commissioners, it gives them flexibility to compromise to the extent they want with the tribe. And again, it's their request, and I think it's a wise request. Thank you.
Just trying to wrap my mind around it, because as one of the new commissioners, we weren't here for the workshops and stuff that was prior. Essentially, we're trying to theorize that with this compromise or this 10-acre adjustment, that the tribe will be okay with density and be okay with the according water usage for that density as it occurs, which therefore will mitigate any type of litigation against us. Because you also said in here that they have the authority to challenge uses and presumably subdivisions underneath county jurisdiction. Am I following along correctly? So if we don't do it, the tribe with that presumable authority, and again, I'm theorizing here, so correct me if I'm wrong, the tribe can come back and just say no to the subdivisions, which I think you referenced at some point that that's what they're doing. But if we go to the 10 acres, then that will actually allow more availability for people to do maybe a smaller subdivision and not have this issue of the water rights coming back at them later. Am I following along with this correctly? Is that what we're trying to?
Yeah, that's where we would be, that's the goal that this would be aiming towards, is reducing friction between the county and property owners and the tribe, and reducing risk of litigation, whether it's over water rights or whatever else.
So somebody who had the 20 acres, 40 acres, 100 acres, and who's had it for 20, 40, 60, 80 years, has not subdivided, this would change that.
Yes.
However, and change it in the set, and also allow them maybe less friction between the tribe, with someone who has that acreage, and this doesn't happen, and they try to subdivide, the tribe can come back and just flat say no. So they still wouldn't be able to subdivide.
They would oppose it. We would, the county still has the final say.
Okay.
And if I may, I've put the tribe on notice that in cases like we have now, where the application meets all other county regulations, I've told the tribe if they are the only outlier opposed to this, then I'm going to approve it, and that's when they may not sue. Don't know.
Another question would be, for some of these larger property owners especially, is there a risk of litigation if we continue to incrementally reduce their property rights? That's a question. I don't know. Maybe it's rhetorical. I don't know.
I think the risk of that is low. It's more than zero, but I think it's low.
Mm-hmm.
Well, government rezoning happens all the time. Hayden just went through that, and people were rezoned from, I think, subdivisions to, I forget the R1, down to mixed use. And that it was just the way the city council did it, which was
Yeah.
very unfortunate for those many people in that area, but.
It reminds me
Yes.
of what was mentioned a couple of meetings ago. I think Commissioner James mentioned, and we concurred, that there's a big difference between what's legal and what's right.
That's very true.
And that's my hang-up is, yeah, I understand it's legal. It's just not right. Commissioner James just iterated his experience where he had to give up some property, I guess due to eminent domain, for a road, and I understand eminent domain. The thing about eminent domain is that the owner does get some sort of remuneration for his property, or the right to that property, whatever, however we want to dance around those semantics. But here we're talking about yanking a person's right with no compensation whatsoever, because it's because it's legal. And water, there's concern, they imply that because these parcels are 5 acres, first they imply that everyone's built on, that everyone has a residence on it, and that's not true, and is likely not to happen. But so then there's a formula we can draw, right? There's a house on 5 acres, that family's going to draw so many acres, maybe acres of, what do they call it, surface of
Acre
water,
feet.
so many gallons of water.
Acre feet of water.
But
Yeah.
But say, for instance, it could happen because you can't build on it, you irrigate and you raise crops and you further the agricultural industry in that area by raising crops that are fully irrigated. The irrigation is going to use more water than what the family would use.
Well, the water right for irrigating water is the same water right as you get for domestic use. It's not, those aren't separate water rights. It's in my subdivision, I have a public drinking water system. I provide domestic water, but I will not provide irrigation for those people that have those big lots out there. They have to drill their own well to irrigate and get another water right for that.
And who provides the permit to drill a well?
Well, the state does to drill a second well. But don't mix up the fact that if somebody drills one hole in the ground, that the water right for what they draw out of that, they can get a water right that will provide domestic water, but also enough of a water right, enough acre feet to irrigate with as well. So, and it's most of those people that have a larger parcel out there, their water right would include both domestic and irrigation use at the same time. So there wouldn't be a separate thing like that. The only reason I've got that in my subdivision is because it's in my bylaws that they can't irrigate with any of the water that they pull out of the public drinking water system. They have to drill a second well.
And so their irrigation rate would be junior to your
To the domestic rate that I have for our public water system, oh, yes.
If there's not enough water, they can get their.
They couldn't irrigate. In fact, my experience, and of course I used to grow grass on the Western Prairie when I was a kid, and burn the fields and all that, and raise all kinds of heck for people. But both there and in the Boise Valley at the same time, I lived there as well. The water drawn for irrigation purposes is far in excess of usually the water drawn for residential uses, because of the huge volumes. I mean, we were pumping 10,000 gallons a minute out there on the Western Prairie on those big grass fields. That's a lot of water.
Madam Chair, if I could, one of the things I do appreciate, and that's a fundamental point of democracy, is disagreement that leads to robust discussion as we're having here. In that vein, I'd like to respond to this concept of eminent domain by the governmental entity results in compensation, and a tribe asserting their rights under the Montana decision or similar law does not result in compensation. The simple answer to that, unless Attorney Braden has another understanding, and I defer to him on this, I don't believe that there is law that says that a tribe asserting their rights under the Montana decision or similar decisions, such as the Beds and Banks decision, has an obligation to compensate the landowners. That's simply the law. There's no law that says they have to. And there is a law that says if the state or federal government condemns your property, then they do have to compensate you. So the simple response to that is it just isn't the law. And perhaps it's an area of law that could be developed. I wouldn't be opposed to that. One could argue that a landowner is entitled to reasonable compensation. I suppose the tribe would counter that they never had the right. The tribe is just asserting a right that they've always had. And it's not that they're taking property, they're just asserting a right that they had to the property from the beginning. And one could debate that issue till the cows come home. But that's a simple response to whether you get compensation or not. And again, I defer to Attorney Braden if he knows of case law or statutory law that requires a tribe to compensate an individual for asserting their rights in this kind of environment.
And Commissioner James, I do not know of any such law. Again, I think it is an open question of law even at the federal level, but there is no statutory or case law that requires that at this time. There may be tribal law that requires it depending on the tribe, but that's up to each tribe.
Right.
Would someone like to propose a motion? Okay, go ahead.
To follow along with Commissioner Malloy and then what Commissioner Slater said,
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing that.
to follow, is that better?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, a lot better.
To follow along with that, and I don't want to delay this process because obviously 2.5 years, this is taking a long time, but is there a viable opportunity to reach out to those approximately 80 people and make sure that they have been adequately informed, and then take that to the county commissioners and say, yep, everybody knows, this is where everybody is, this is the deal, and make that determination closer to that June date?
May I respond? I think that's immaterial, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because this undoes everything. This undoes the whole opt-out process. So even the 17,000 acres, the owners that represent that 17,000 acres are going to be undone in their opt-out if this were to be passed. So it doesn't matter if they're going to go ahead and pass this. It doesn't matter if the other 80 people know about it or not.
Okay.
And because there's no opt-out available to this. It's either done or it's not done. The landowners don't get the opt-out, and we were just kidding about the first one. So it's poorly timed. I think it's poorly conceived. I think it's trying to accomplish something other than what it says it is. So I'll make a motion that we recommend to the Board of County Commissioners to, I'm not sure what the right word is, deny or rescind or otherwise.
Not adopt.
Reject.
To not adopt. Yeah,
Reject from these.
Reject.
That would be
Yeah.
a good term also.
Do you have maybe addendum to that of what you would like to do?
No, I don't. I think it should be rejected, especially in light of the tribal rezone that we're in the middle of now until June 30th. So, no, I have nothing to add.
We need a vote then.
Need a second.
Yeah, we need a second, I'm
The
sorry.
motion,
Sorry.
did anyone second that?
Needs to be a second.
If we do a second, then we can go into discussion, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so I second it, so we go into a discussion. If this is
I'm sorry, was the motion seconded?
Yes, we're in discussion right now.
Okay. Yeah, Madam Chair, I think it's incorrect to say that this is completely undoes the
So,
rezoning decision. No, it doesn't. What it does is it provides a compromise that you can subdivide down to 10 acres, not 5. It doesn't completely rezone undo the decision. And I will stand by everything else I've said. I think it's a reasonable compromise proposed by the commissioners, and it should be should be passed. So I don't I don't agree with my fellow commissioner, although I understand what he's saying, and I too care a lot about property rights and individual property rights, and I think this measure would foster those in a fair and compromised environment. Why compromise has become a dirty word, I don't know. Because it's not. It's required in all relationships, from friendship to marriage to political relationships. And that's what fosters growth and healthy growth. And I'll end there.
Just as a question, that the rezone was to rezone from rural to ag. Totally different from what we're saying, that we're limiting breaking up land in the rural zone, right? I mean, that is two
That was
different.
my earlier point about how this is a de minimis reduction in property use.
So the people who are remaining in and not opting out would presumably go to ag. And that may be their choice. And it has nothing to do, once they're in ag, they're in a whole different set of rules.
One that prohibits subdivisions.
Right.
But
So presumably, those people who are, they will have nothing. I mean, they will not even be affected by this because they will be out of the rural zone and into the ag zone.
that's correct.
And are we talking about the 80 people that I refer to?
Yes. If they don't respond, they will go into the ag zone,
Assuming they're 20 acres or more.
assuming they're 20 acres and more. They will go into the ag zone, which has a whole different set of rules than what we're talking about changing the rule in the rural zone.
No, I understand that. And there's likely some of those 80 who would rather not see that happen. But the people that did opt out thought they were opting out for one thing, and now we're changing the rules. This would change the rules. I don't say we're changing the rules. This changes the rules in the middle of the game. I don't even see how that's legal.
Madam Chair, I guess if you look at this from the standpoint that I believe that this opt-out thing still was considering subdivisions down to 5 acres, wasn't it? I mean, is it in the language itself, the opt-out language? Because, everything in Kootenai County that was rural was a 5-acre rule, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so when these folks were informed that, hey, you can opt out of this thing if you have land within the reservation boundaries, they were opting out so that they could still subdivide. I mean, they wouldn't be able to subdivide if it went agriculture at all. So, I mean, they might be a little misinformed from the standpoint that, well, when I opted out, I was thinking about dividing my 20 acres into 4 5-acre lots. And now, if this amendment was made, they'd only be able to do it to 10-acre lots. But if they hadn't opted out, they wouldn't be able to do any subdivision of any kind, because it would have been ag land. So, I mean, it might be a little misleading, but it's not misleading from the standpoint that you're telling them they're gonna, you're only gonna be able to subdivide to 10-acre lots versus 5, because I think most of their understanding was, if I don't opt out, I won't be able to subdivide at all. So I think that's another key issue here. It is a difference, though. Like you say, it's a difference from what I think they might have been contemplating when they opted out, because they thought they might be able to still do 5-acre lots.
That's exactly what they thought. That was what the opt-out was.
Yeah. But the alternative to that they wouldn't be able to do anything.
Well, that must be compromise. I'll bet that's what Mr. James considers compromise.
Well, I don't.
They're kind of unrelated. I mean, they're definitely related, but I'm not sure we should be confusing or intermingling, or maybe conflating is the word so popular now. Those who did not opt out, they're not going to be any better off if they fail to opt out. I'm not sure, I don't understand what it is you're trying to say.
Well, what I'm saying is that by them opting out, they will be able to, under the current new opt-out program, they will still be able to subdivide their property into subdivisions.
Yeah, just not as much as they thought. Just not as much
But
as
they
they were
won't,
told.
they might not be able to subdivide it into as many lots as they thought they could if they opted out. And I,
When they opted out.
yeah, right. I agree with that. But I mean, the point is that the alternative by not opting out is zilch. You can't subdivide anything. And that's so whether or not it's I don't even call it a compromise. This is just, it's on one issue, they were able to opt out, which the county commissioners chose to do, and they can still subdivide their land because it's still rural. And this other issue is a different issue from the standpoint of the size of the lots, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that by opting out, they can still subdivide. I'm sure that they had in their mind, some of them, or most of them, thought, well, we'll be under the 5-acre normal Kootenai County rule when we opt out.
Will,
Madam Chair, if I could, Mr. Callahan mentioned earlier that the potentiality that the tribe would be the only outside objector to a subdivision. I want to appraise us of this fact, and it's a fact because I've seen it, that within the tribal boundaries, it's not just the tribe that opposes development of subdivisions, particularly dense subdivisions within the tribal boundaries. There are many non-tribal members who oppose that. I know because they contact me because one of the unfortunate consequences of having the label attorney is anybody within about a 100-mile radius, and including family members who have any legal issue, they seem to come to you when they are upset about something. And so I have been a recipient of many inquiries about non-tribal members on how to stop what they view as rampant development that is beginning to occur within the tribal boundaries. And what you will see, I'm confident, and particularly in the northern part where I live, is that if there's an attempt to subdivide, in 5-acre increments, you're not only going to see the tribe oppose it, you're going to see non-tribal men. I'm talking about myself only. There's a lot of them who will oppose development, I believe, depending on the location. But there can be a number of non-tribal members who oppose development, which puts Mr. Callahan in a cross-legged position of what to do when you have tribal and non-tribal members and the tribe opposing a request for subdivision, and particularly minor subdivisions or serial minor subdivisions, and we're back in the same, what the French call a magouille, the same magouille that we had before. So once again, I think holding out a reasonable compromise, and compromise is not a dirty word, is the way to go.
if we pass this tonight, it goes to the county commissioners as a recommendation. Will any further information be given to any of these property owners, telling them the difference now? Will they be made aware of that beyond just the normal putting it in the newspaper or the public hearing? Will they be informed of the difference in the acreage, that instead of it understanding it to be 5, it's now going to be 10? Will there be a second communication going out to them, informing them that this is now a 10 acreage, minimum instead of the 5 acre? So then there's not this discrepancy or maybe misunderstanding, or they'll say, well, we didn't know that, we thought it was 5. Now you're saying 10. When did that happen? Is it normal? Do you send something out letting them know?
Normally, the customary procedure is merely a newspaper notice and anything we may put on the internet. It's an easy thing to do, so I'll commit to you. We'll go ahead and put on our Keeping Kootenai webpage what's going on here. That is available for all the world to see, literally. I'm a little hesitant to say we should spend $2,000 for another round of postcards, because without the commissioner's approval, because it's not in my budget, and it's beyond customary.
So it's possible.
Mr. Callahan, if I could ask, you say $2,000, being sensitive to the rights of notice, which I'm very sensitive to. I think everybody ought to have notice. Would it cost $2,000 to give notice to the individuals that we know have not opted out yet? It sounds like a narrow slice of people. Is that what you're thinking of when you say 2,000, or
I was thinking
would it be less?
I was thinking of the entire area.
Entire.
Again, like we've done
Yeah,
for the rezoning.
correct.
But
It sounds like my fellow council member has done a great deal of work, and I applaud him for that, to assure that there's notice to everybody, and he's identified a number of individuals with the help of your staff who haven't been notified. Might it be feasible to provide them with a postcard so that they're aware?
yes, sir. If Commissioner Malloy would be so kind as to give us the information he has.
Yeah, it's all scribbles now, but I can translate it into something legible. And I think that's a good idea. I appreciate the thought. All we can do is as much as we can do, and I don't know if registered mail or something is necessary or appropriate. That, of course, triples or more, the price.
That's
A
$5.
lot of these are absentee. So as I look at the addresses, I see Florida, and Arizona, and places certainly not local. And that's another reason why they may not have paid attention to some postcard. I don't know. But I appreciate that thought, and I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, and bear in mind, there are people, I know across from us, for example, there's a trust, people live in Seattle. There are people who just don't agree and want to keep it agricultural. But that said, I am very sensitive to notice. And I think everybody will have a right to make the decision, even if we have to bend over a little backwards here. And I would be amenable to an amendment, speaking of compromise, amendment to a recommendation, and we're not there yet, to the language of this proposal with a request that the county commissioners provide resources to adequately, assure whatever, postcards or whatever Mr. Callahan thinks is needed to go the extra mile to notify these people who have not opted out of the tribal rezoning matter.
Well, in my opinion, they're two separate issues. Trying to get everyone notified of the opt-out is one issue pertinent to the action that's already been taken. Of course, it is related somehow, and like I say, it's intertwined with this thing, but I would think that the notification, that extra effort to notify those, what I'll refer to as the 80, I think should be done regardless of what action we take here tonight. And I don't know if that takes a motion or.
No, I think where we're at procedurally is your motion, and the second is before us. And we've had discussion. At some point, we'll have a vote, and then we can discuss what we do after that, if anything.
Madam Chair, I think it's not working. There it is. It's time to call the question, I think, on this and see how everybody wants to vote on this issue, and then if we want to discuss how to better inform the public of our activities. Folks, I've been in this business a long, long time, and you can't, bring the horse to water with this. There's so many different ways people can be informed of what their government agencies and parties are doing nowadays. And there's just a whole lot of them that just don't engage for whatever reason. So it's not like, I don't want us to think that because out of so many hundreds or whatever, there's 30 or 40% of them that don't even act like they know what you're doing and only show up to complain when they said they weren't informed, and you've informed them all properly in the papers and all the proper procedures that we're supposed to operate under as an organization within the state of Idaho and the U.S. It's almost impossible to keep everybody informed of everything that's going on because so many people are disconnected, and in many ways they're just working to make a living and feed their family, and they're not paying a whole lot of attention to. They don't go through their computer 2 hours a day to look at all the political stuff going on like I do. with all the reports I get from Washington DC still. But anyway, it's a very difficult thing, folks, and it's very commendable that everybody is concerned about that. But we need to have some reasonableness with how we inform people of what's going on. So I just call the question on this.
Okay, we have a motion in front of us to reject this suggestion.
Commissioner Bateson?
Nay.
Commissioner Harwood? No. Commissioner James?
Nay, no,
Commissioner Malley?
Boyd?
Boy,
So the motion is to reject it, so I am an aye.
Commissioner Slater?
Nay.
Chair David?
Nay. Now,
I think well, when I referenced doing the communication out to the entire, so you said you will do to Connect Kootenai, which presumably most of those people are monitoring that. Because I think his concern, which I agree with, is that these people did their opt-out and then they're done. That it's over and with and they're moving away and they think that they're totally fine and they're not aware of this. So somehow getting some type of communication, minimal expense, minimal time for staff to those people as well, because I can envision that, you know, this passes or something passes in June and they come back and say, no, this was only 5, not 10, and we're going to have a whole nother issue on our hands. So not just the 80, maybe postcards to the 80, but somehow putting something in the newspaper to the entire group of people. And if they've already responded, do we have good contact information for them? That it could be easier. I would volunteer to be a subcommittee to reach out to all those people and do that on my own time, my own dollar, to make sure that they are aware. So I think there's ways to do that to help, so it's not a tax issue, it's not a staff issue, it's not a time issue. Make sure that we are doing our due diligence and getting these people informed as much as possible prior to the June ruling, that this is on the table, and that's why I rejected it. That I think they need to be aware that this is on the table because this is not going to go away, and that they're properly informed, and then we proceed from there.
And whoever makes the next motion can include that in their motion to recommend to the county commissioners.
and to pick up what you just said, we make a recommendation. If the county commissioners choose to take our recommendation, they can. If they choose to say, no, we're just going to notice, that's what that's on them, so.
But at least this commission would have done its job.
Correct.
So,
I would like to interject that there is no June 30th ruling, though. June 30th is, the ruling's already been made, is that correct? That June 30th is just the end of the date,
the end of the opt-out period,
the
correct?
end of the opt-out period. That's going to happen regardless.
Yes, you're correct, that ruling has been made.
No. But I'm
But
all
they're not
for,
aware of it.
but
You're
I'm-
saying that people aren't aware.
all but these 80 people may or may not be aware. We wouldn't have had this problem if we want to revisit history a little bit. If the county commissioners had allowed people to opt in instead of opting out, there wouldn't have been this issue.
And
Because-
there was that debate among the commissioners
Right.
as
And
to
the-
which one to
and the
do,
board,
and I
they-
was
Yeah, which to me,
neutral as to.
yeah,
which
they
one.
could have chosen the right thing to do.
Is that this current board or prior
the
board?
current board,
Current Board of County Commissioners debated about whether people should opt in or opt out. Well, if I'm living in Florida and I know I've got some value in a piece of property out in Coeur d'Alene that I can use for my retirement, and I'm going to be thinking about Florida, not Idaho, and I have trust in government that no shenanigans are going to be played, right?
That's the first issue.
Well, that's my point. If there was an opt-in, that trust might have been a little more validated or justified. But when it's an opt-out, the commissioners are saying, well, maybe we can get some of these people to overlook this and we can get a little more acreage. This is me being sarcastic and what?
Madam Chair, the speculation that somehow the government's going to own the property or whatever, it's beside the point. I make the motion that this board recommend to the Board of County Commissioners to go ahead with this change, and that we add something to our recommendation language about getting these people, like you said, informed. And I think you're focusing on informing the people who haven't answered back about their opt-out, but you're also concerned about telling the people about the 10-acre, the change in the zone as well. So maybe we can work something out to that effect. But my motion then is to make the recommendation to the BOCC to go ahead with this, with our request that some effort be made to inform the parties of both subjects, the opt-out subject and the 10-acre subject.
I second that.
I'd like to, I'm not sure what Robert's rules allows or prescribes, but I would like.
We have a
you-
seconded motion, so we're in discussion right now.
Okay, so I'm discussing then. That's where Robert's rules is. I would like to discuss the notion that you include in your motion, some recommended date at the bottom of the page.
You want an amendment to the motion?
Well, so if I could, Madam Chair, to refine that motion, one of the things we could say is that we recommend that the commissioners, within their discretion, provide reasonable funds to notify the 80 individuals, or wherever many there are, who haven't yet opted out. Maybe, and I struggle here for Mr. Callahan's input, whether we should send another postcard or what effort should be made. Perhaps another postcard, because we do have to balance it against the legitimate concern that, look, people aren't children. We don't have to, spoon feed them. We can give them reasonable notice, and 2 postcards probably is more than reasonable notice. As to the others, I'm not sure that they, I'm not, let me just say, I think that notice requirement will be fulfilled, and Mr. Callahan can inform us on this, when the county commissioners holds their hearing on the ultimate decision on the 10-acre issue. They're going to have to give notice, and people will have a right to be heard, just as they did in this proceeding. So I think that'll be taken care of as a matter of due course. But I am, again, sensitive to my fellow commissioners' concern about the 80 people that they've made a conscious decision to not opt out.
Madam Chair, if it helps, I'd ask the commission to please separate in your mind. The newspaper notice that we did for this hearing is all that's required for a code amendment. And that would be all that we would do for the county commissioners normally. Separate that from the rezoning, where we voluntarily, because the tribe paid for it, sent out additional notice by the way of postcards. The tribe paid for that. We got it out there multiple times because the tribe paid for it. And so what I could do, if you're of a mind to support it, depending on how the vote goes, I can go to the county commissioners tomorrow and the next day and say, here's where the plan commission is. Are you willing to put off your public hearing until we can come up with a new notice strategy? I could run it by the board before we actually execute it and go from there.
Mr. Callahan, is that a notice strategy for the county commissioners? Are you saying you don't have to give notice? I thought you had to give notice for the county commissioners.
We do.
Decision on
it's
it.
only by newspaper. The newspaper of record.
Okay, which I was referring to. I was referring to that as in due course. You would give notice the way you normally would for the commissioners to take care of the issue before us on the 10 acres.
Right.
Yeah.
What I'm volunteering to do is to talk with the commissioners, since this is legislative, to say you have a concern as a commission about notice. Board, county commissioners, would you be willing to let us spend money for a postcard notice?
And the motion.
Well, to be clear, what I'm concerned with is not that people are given notice in due course of the 10-acre issue. I'm trying to be sensitive to my fellow commissioners' concern that the 80 people may not have gotten notice sufficient with the postcards. which, frankly, I think it is sufficient, but I'm trying to be reasonable and look at that issue on the merits and sensitive to that notice issue. My concern was not with the commissioner's decision on the 10-acre parcel issue, because that's going to be sent out the way it's normally sent out, and nobody showed up here today, or very few people did, and I, they'll get another whack at it with the commissioners. That's not a concern to me.
And the motion on the table, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's to recommend to the commissioners that they provide Director Callahan with the resources to send out individual notices regarding both the, impending end of the opt-out period and this proposal.
No, I didn't mention that we go for the funding. My motion was is that we recommend to the Board of Commissioners that this amendment be approved.
Right.
And that we ask that they have the staff try to develop some way to further inform the public of these actions. And it's not ask them for funding or anything.
I
Yeah.
stand corrected.
Yeah, no, that's what my motion, because I don't know how Dave's going to be able to work this out. See, yeah.
Somehow provide.
Some process or help or whatever it takes to and again, I mentioned there's two issues. One is the opt-out thing, and if somebody is living in Timbuktu and doesn't know they should be opting out, it'd be kind of nice for them to know that. Now, this 10-acre thing is another issue, and you guys need to work with staff and figure out how you might be able to deal with that as well.
Well, I appreciate the clarification.
Okay, thank you.
And if it helps, we're only sending a direct notice by mail to 80 people, that could be a letter form. That would give me the luxury of actually explaining what's going on. It's difficult in a little postcard.
And it's a postcard that was more likely to get trashed, right, and disregarded, I should say. A letter would be more impactful.
Right.
Is there a way to go back to the tribe and see if they will help supplement that? Make sure that we're getting
I can
everybody.
always ask. I don't know
Always
what
ask,
the
they
answer
can say no,
Right.
but at least then it may not necessarily be a complete county cost.
Right.
We're talking about 80 people. I can cover the cost of the postage and the envelopes,
Again,
Yeah.
just
Madam Chair, I would move the motion be modified to allow Mr. Callahan to send letters as he suggests to the 80 people or 80 odd people that haven't opted out yet, but that no further notice than is required by statute be given regarding the 10-acre parcel issue, for the reason that I think you are getting into a fiscal issue where the commissioners are going to have to start allocating funds for that beyond what they normally would. And it's giving this issue sort of a privileged status regarding vis-a-vis all kinds of other issues that we have that by statute we only give required notice. That's a motion to modify it. Would need a second, and if there's no second, it fails.
Well, again, I'd like to explain it. I'm not trying to tie the county commissioners down to doing anything fiscally. It's just to, have the staff work out something, and if they can't, they're unable to do anything further than sending a letter to the opt-out people at least, then I guess that's the end of the process. I agree with you. I do not want this organization to have to start taking all kinds of extreme means to notify people, because that, my experience is it just about drove me crazy for a while with the Basin Commission, trying to get people to find out what was going on and to answer, my letters to them and emails and older people wanted hard mail because they didn't have a computer, and then there was just one thing after another. And then not only that, many people no longer even subscribe to the newspapers anymore. So I used to have to put notification in 4 local newspapers of everything the Basin Commission did. And finally, the Attorney General's office said, you don't have to do that, Terry, under the open meeting law. So we pulled back quite a bit just in the last year. So it's a real problem for these folks to inform people and get the public knowledgeable. So, I think that if, I just want to give them the opportunity to look at it, that's all. I don't want to commit anything fiscally.
So are you seconding Lee's motion?
I didn't hear that, I'm sorry.
No, I'd like the motion to just stand the way I made it.
So perhaps, Attorney Braden, you can restate the motion so we're all clear on what we're voting on?
I think Commissioner Harwood already did. And I would, and I think, the way he re-described and clarified his motion in response to my misstatement, I think is sufficient at this point.
However,
Okay.
And say it again if you'd like.
I had asked earlier, and it kind of got overrun by the discussion, if the amendment could be, if a motion could be amended to include an advised or suggested date for the bottom line on the proposed text amendment, or what do we,
It's a text
whatever this is
amendment.
called. There's a bottom line on here that says, the ordinance shall be null and void and of no further force or effect on or after some date. I'm asking if
It'd be 3 years in the future,
If
3
you're-
years after adoption.
The commissioners,
My motion was to accept it the way that it's been in the handout. And I spoke to Dave about that clause specifically, because if we get further down the road here and we've done a study on availability of water resources and all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't look like we're really going to have a problem with say 5-acre properties, then this 3-year period of time gives us a chance to further see how this works when we try to implement it. We see how many people get upset by it, and so that does give us an opportunity to reconsider this particular proposal. But again, we might have all new county commissioners, and they reconsider it anyway, in the future. But this does, having this clause in here makes me feel more comfortable that we are in fact going to take a good look at how this all works between all the parties involved, and then at the end of that, I guess it's 3 years period of time, then we have the opportunity to reconsider it.
well, there is a clause here, but nowhere does it say 3 years.
I can add, that was Commissioner Matari's idea. He actually said as much.
It's on it's at the top of the second page.
Oh, I must have,
Yeah.
Director Callahan, when you first
That's
introduced
on the
this, you said
proposal, not on the report.
when you first introduced this, you said that the county commissioners requested that they have a waiting period, or an end period, but they would set that. Is that correct?
Well, ultimately, it's commissioner's prerogative, is whatever the number is.
Right.
At the moment, if you read the actual ordinance, the way it's drafted is it's going to expire 3 years after the date of adoption.
oh, I guess I missed that
Okay.
altogether.
Yeah, it's in the.
It's in the actual
proposed-
ordinance.
It's in the proposed ordinance itself, not in
Not in this
the
write-up.
report that's on the screen. You only have one page of that, it looks like, the first page, but the second page.
That's correct.
Well, the version that I have says in section 6, shall be null and void and no further force effect on or after such and such 2000 something.
27.
It doesn't say that, though.
Oh.
Yeah, the one that was sent out is blanks. Those are blanks.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
the bottom of page 1.
proposal is that it sunsets 3 years after.
Okay.
Oh, move up.
There.
Yeah, and the reason I left it blank is because we don't know when it's going to.
Yeah, you don't know when it's going to go into effect. You got to add 3 years to that, so,
Yeah.
okay.
But it is,
Okay, so where does it say 3 years? Can you highlight that for me?
it doesn't
Does
there. But it would be 3 years after the,
That number would be inserted by the county commissioners.
Yeah.
At the hearing date, presumably. Because
After their approval?
no, but right before that.
Prior to their approval, yeah.
because presumably they won't.
Madam Chair, now that I understand the motion better, and that bad on me for not, I am in favor of this motion to approve the proposed ordinance or statute and will change, and to couple it with a request that the commissioners, without fiscal impact or, well, let's say fiscal impact, take another look at the notice issue. I think that's a wise thing to do, and I'm in favor of that. Leaving that to their sound discretion is how I would say it from a legal standpoint.
We are ready for a vote.
Did we get a second?
Yeah.
Commissioner Batson?
Yes?
Commissioner Harwood? Yes. Commissioner James?
Yes?
Commissioner Malloy?
No?
Commissioner Slater?
Yes.
Chair David?
Yes.
Like exact negatives.
Thank you, commissioners.
I do believe we are done.
Make a motion to close this meeting.
I don't think we have to have a motion, is that correct? We can just close it.
I was just kidding.